The photograph landed on his desk at 11:47 p.m. Jae-min did not look up immediately. He was in the middle of reviewing a 14-page acquisition brief, and nothing. Not a phone call from the chairman, not a fire alarm, not the end of the world itself. Interrupted Jae-min when he was working. His security chief, Park Dae-ho, knew this. Every man in that office knew this, which was why the silence that followed the photograph hitting the glass desk was so thick, so strange, that two of the junior analysts physically stopped typing. Jae-min reached for the photograph without looking up. He placed 2 fingers on it and slid it closer, the way a man moves a chess piece. Automatic, controlled, bored. Then he looked at it, and the room changed. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't gasp, didn't flinch. I didn't slam his hand down or lean forward. Jae-min was not a man who performed his reactions, but the briefing paper slowly left his fingers, and he didn't notice it fall. The photograph was a still pulled from a street-level security feed near the Gangnam district, grainy at the edges, overexposed in the center because of the way the streetlights fractured through the evening air. And in the middle of it stood a woman. Young, black American, clearly not local, dressed in a khaki jacket with a camera raised to her face. Her chin was slightly lifted. Her shoulders were squared. The light was hitting her in a way that made her look like she was standing in the middle of something sacred, something deliberate, like the city itself had decided to make her beautiful right at that moment. Jae-min stared at the photograph for 4 minutes. Nobody in the room moved. Park Dae-ho, who had served this man for 11 years and had watched him negotiate billion-dollar deals with less expression than a stone wall, quietly stepped back 1 pace. He had never in 11 years seen his boss look at anything for 4 unbroken minutes. When Jae-min finally spoke, his voice was low, final, the kind of voice that didn't leave room for questions. Bring her to me. Not, who is she? Not, what did she photograph? Not, is she a threat? Just, bring her to me. Park Dae-ho opened his mouth, hesitated. Sir, she's a foreign national, an American. We'd need to... I said what I said. Park Dae-ho closed his mouth. Jae-min picked up the briefing paper, set the photograph face up at the corner of his desk, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. But his left hand, resting flat on the glass surface, was clenched into a fist. And for a man who had spent 17 years perfecting absolute control, that fist said everything. Jasmine Brown had not wanted to come to Seoul. That needed to be said plainly, because everything that came after, the apartment, the rooftop, the man with the unreadable eyes, would make more sense if you understood that first. She had not chased this city. She had not packed her bags with excitement or bought a travel journal or spent hours on Pinterest saving aesthetic photos of Gyeongbokgung Palace. She had packed in 2 hours on a Tuesday night, sitting cross-legged on the floor of her Chicago apartment, stuffing lenses and memory cards into her camera bag, while her best friend Tanisha sat on the bed eating noodles and watching her with that specific expression that meant, I think you're making a mistake, but I love you too much to say it directly. You could grieve here, Tanisha had said. Chicago has perfectly good places to fall apart. I'm not falling apart. Jasmine, I'm working. And that was the thing. She was working. The contract had come through her agency, a 3-week urban photography assignment for a Seoul-based architectural magazine, urban landscapes, cultural sites, quiet street moments. The kind of job she'd done 50 times in 50 different cities. The money was good. The timing was terrible. Her father had been dead for exactly 22 days when she boarded the flight. David Brown had been a documentary photographer himself. That was the inheritance. Not money, not property, just the eye. The way of looking at the world like it owed you honesty if you were patient enough to wait for it. He'd taught her how to hold a camera before she could read. He'd taught her that grief was something you could photograph your way through. That the lens created distance between you and the thing that was hurting you. Just enough distance to breathe. So she was photographing her way through his death. That was the logic. That was what she told Tanisha and her mother and the 3 other people who called to check on her in those first 3 weeks. I'm fine. I'm working. I'll be fine. Seoul received her the way big cities receive everyone. indifferently, grandly, with a kind of overwhelming aliveness that made her own smallness feel almost like relief. She landed at Incheon on a Thursday morning, took a cab to the small serviced apartment the agency had arranged in Mapogu, and spent the first 2 days being a professional. She photographed Han River at dawn. She photographed the Bukchon Hanak village in the golden afternoon light. She ate alone at small restaurants, pointing at menus she couldn't read, and something about that, in the total anonymity of not being understood and not needing to be, felt like exactly what she'd needed. By the 3rd day, she was sleeping better than she had in a month. By the 5th day, she went to Gangnam. She went because her creative brief mentioned the contrast between old and new Seoul, and there was nowhere that contrast lived more loudly than in Gangnam at night. The glass towers and the neon, and the people who moved like they had somewhere extraordinary to be. She took the subway, which she'd been slowly figuring out, and emerged from the station at 9 p.m. into cold, bright air and the smell of street food and car exhaust. And for 2 hours, she was just a photographer. That was all. She moved through the district quietly, raising her camera, adjusting, finding angles, catching the way the light from the storefronts reflected in puddles left from an afternoon rain. She was happy, or close to it, the closest she'd been since the call came. Then she turned down a side street, following the angle of a neon sign that was casting extraordinary red shadows, and she stopped. At the far end of the narrow street, between 2 black vehicles, a group of men stood in a loose formation. They were dressed in dark clothing, still and controlled in a way that felt deliberate. There were maybe 8 of them, and facing them, alone, or nearly alone, just one man slightly behind him, stood someone who was clearly in charge of something. She knew it the way you know a storm is coming before it arrives. The posture, the stillness, the way the other men's bodies were angled slightly toward him, almost unconsciously, like planets orbiting. She should have turned around. She knew that, even then. Instead, she raised her camera. Because David Brown's daughter, when faced with a shot like that, the light, the tension, the composition, was constitutionally incapable of walking away. She pressed the shutter 3 times, fast, and on her 3rd press, the man at the center of it turned his head, just slightly, just a fraction, in her direction. She lowered the camera, stepped back, turned and walked, fast but not running, back toward the main street. Her heart was moving at a speed that had nothing to do with the photographs and everything to do with the look on that man's face in the fraction of a second before she turned away. Not angry, not threatening, just aware, like he'd filed her away. She told herself it was nothing. She ate ramyun at a convenience store, took the subway back to Mapogu, uploaded her shots, and went to sleep. She did not think about the man in the alley again until the phone rang at 2 a.m. The number was unknown. She almost didn't answer. She answered. The voice on the other end was low, Korean accented, but his English was precise, unhurried, like a man who never wasted words and had decided to spend some on her. Miss Brown, you took photographs tonight in Gangnam that you were not meant to take. Because of that, your life is now at risk. You need to leave your current apartment tonight. A car is waiting outside. You will not be harmed, but you need to come now. A long silence. Who is this? Someone who has a vested interest in keeping you alive. That's not an answer. It's the only one I'm giving you right now. The car will wait for 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, I cannot make the same guarantees. He hung up. Jasmine sat in the dark for 45 seconds. Then she got up, packed her camera bag, and went downstairs. She told herself it was because of the way he'd said cannot make the same guarantees. The cool certainty of it, the lack of theatrics. Men who were bluffing used more words. Men who were stating facts used fewer. The car was a black Audi. The driver did not speak. She got in. The apartment was on the 31st floor. Jasmine stood at the floor-to-ceiling window at 3 a.m. and looked at Seoul spread out below her like something spilled. Light bleeding into light, towers and bridges and the dark ribbon of the Han River catching reflections. It was, objectively, one of the most beautiful views she had ever seen in her life. She was also furious. Okay, she said, turning away from the window to face Park Dae-ho, who was the only one who had come upstairs with her. The driver had stayed in the garage. There had been two other men in the lobby who said nothing and looked everywhere. I'd like an explanation now, a real one, not vested interest in keeping you alive. Who called me? Why am I here? What exactly did I photograph? Park Dae-ho was a compact man in his mid-40s with a face like weathered concrete and eyes that gave nothing away. He had, she would later learn, been a military intelligence officer for 9 years before joining the Han Group's private security division. He looked at her now with the polite blankness of a man who had answered exactly 0 questions he wasn't authorized to answer. Someone will explain everything to you in the morning, he said. The apartment is fully stocked. The bedroom is to your right. There is a rooftop access via the staircase at the end of the hall, but please don't go up tonight. Please don't. She stopped, breathed. Gerhard, am I a prisoner? You are a guest. Guests can leave. Guests are also free to make choices that put themselves in danger. He said it without a flicker of judgment. Just fact. The photographs you took tonight are of interest to people who will not handle the situation with the same care as we are handling it. That's all I can say right now. He left. The door did not lock from the outside. She checked immediately, running to it and pressing the handle. It opened. She stood in the open doorway for a moment, looking at the empty corridor, the elevator at the far end. Then she went back inside. Because as much as she hated to admit it, he was right. She was in a foreign country. It was 3 a.m. She had no idea what she'd stumbled into, and the safest option right now, however maddening, was the one she already had. She photographed the apartment, methodically, room by room, because it was what she did when she was afraid and needed to think. The kitchen, full fridge, good coffee, a detail she noticed and immediately resented because it meant someone had planned for her arrival. The bedroom, understated, expensive, a window that looked east, a desk with perfect light. The bathroom, her preferred brand of face wash on the shelf. Another detail, another sign of preparation. Someone had known she was coming before she had. She photographed that, the bottle of face wash, and it disturbed her more than anything else in the apartment. She slept badly. She dreamed of her father. In the morning, she found coffee already made in the kitchen. Hot, which meant someone had been in the apartment while she slept, which meant she was angrier before she'd finished her first cup than she'd been when she'd gone to sleep. She took her coffee to the window. Seoul was different in the morning, softer. The light came in from the east at an angle that made everything look like it was being revealed slowly, carefully, like a photographer with good instincts was controlling it. She missed her father with a sharpness that surprised her. Grief was unpredictable that way. Quiet for days, then sudden and specific, triggered by something as small as good morning light hitting a strange city. She was still standing at the window when she heard the elevator open in the corridor. Jae-min had not intended to come himself on the first morning. He had a board meeting at 9 a.m. He had 3 calls before that. He had a company to run, a rival corporate faction to outmaneuver, and an internal security breach to manage. The same breach, in fact, that had led to the woman now standing on the 31st floor of his Apgujeong property. He told Park Dae-ho he would send someone, a representative, someone senior enough to be credible, junior enough to be unthreatening. He outlined exactly what they should say and in what order. Then at 7:15 a.m., he picked up the still frame from his desk, the one from the security feed, and stood there long enough that Park Dae-ho, watching from the doorway, wisely decided not to speak. He canceled the representative. He went himself. She heard the door and turned around, and the first thing she noticed was that she recognized him. Not from any public context. She didn't follow Korean business news. She had no idea who Jae-min was in any formal sense. She recognized him the way you recognize someone you've already photographed. The posture, the stillness, the quality of presence that took up space without making noise. The man from the alley. You, she said, not a question. Sit down, Miss Brown. He moved to the kitchen counter, set his phone face down, turned to her. He was wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, which seemed to be as casual as this man got. His face was... She couldn't help it. She was always looking at faces for composition. Extraordinary. Sharp and clean, the kind of face that photographed well from any angle, with eyes that were dark and absolutely focused. I'd rather stand. He looked at her for a moment, then almost imperceptibly, Something shifted in his expression. Not warmth, more like id recalibration. All right, tell me what's happening, all of it. So he did. Not all of it, she would learn that later, but enough. His name, his company, the Han Group, one of South Korea's largest conglomerates, $40 billion in assets, operations spanning energy, tech, and hospitality. And beneath that, because she had earned the truth with what she'd walked into, the other layer, alliances, rival factions, corporate warfare that occasionally wore different clothes. The men she'd photographed in the alley were conducting a negotiation of the kind that didn't happen in boardrooms. A negotiation his rivals, the organization he called, flatly, the Bay Syndicate, had been trying to intercept for 3 weeks. Her photographs had captured faces, positions, enough detail in the wrong hands to confirm information that would destabilize a very carefully balanced set of circumstances. So you're telling me I accidentally photographed a deal, she said. You photographed something that could cost lives if it reaches certain people. And those people, the Bay Syndicate, they know I was there. They have your image from the same street camera feed we pulled. Yes, she let that sit. So they'll come after me. They are already looking for you. Your previous apartment was compromised by 4 a.m. She felt cold. And what exactly is the plan? I just live here? In your apartment? For how long? Until we contain the situation. How long is that? I don't know. He said it without apology, which was somehow worse than if he'd dressed it up. Could be days. Could be longer. I have a job, a contract. I have. Your agency has been contacted. Your assignment has been extended with full compensation. You have everything you need here. She stared at him. The presumption of it, the sheer absolute presumption, made something hot climb up through her chest. You called my agency without asking me? You were asleep. That's not the point. He looked at her steadily, unmoved but not dismissive. That was the strange thing about him. He was listening. What would you have done differently? I would have. She stopped, because the honest answer was that she didn't know. She was in a foreign country and people were looking for her, and she didn't speak the language and she didn't know the city. She hated that he'd made her reach that conclusion herself instead of just giving her something to push against. Fine, she said. Fine. I'll stay, for now. But I want full communication. If something changes, I hear about it first. Not through your people. From you. He looked at her again. That same quality of attention that she'd caught through her lens in the alley. The sense that he was genuinely processing what she said, rather than waiting for her to finish speaking. Most powerful men she'd encountered were the other kind. The waiting kind. Agreed, he said. He left without another word. She stood in the kitchen holding her coffee cup and stared at the door for a full minute after he was gone. Then she went and got her camera. Han Min-woo arrived on the second afternoon with a paper bag of tteokbokki, a portable Bluetooth speaker playing something that sounded like indie pop, and a grin so wide and unguarded that Jasmine's first thought was that the two of them could not possibly share blood. I'm Min-woo, he said in easy American-inflected English, Jae-min's younger brother. He sent me because I'm less terrifying. He paused. His words. Jasmine blinked. He said that? He said, and I quote, "You're less likely to make her more hostile," which from him is basically a compliment to us both. He held out the bag. Tteokbokki? It's from the place 2 streets over. You can't actually go there right now, which is criminal, because it's one of the best things you'll ever eat. She took the bag. She hadn't eaten properly since breakfast, and the smell, warm, spiced, rich with the particular sweetness of the sauce, hit her before she even opened the container. Min-woo was 32, charming in the easy way that suggested he'd been charming since birth and had decided to lean into it rather than resist it. Where Jae-min occupied a room like a gravitational center, everything organizing itself around him, Min-woo moved through spaces like he was visiting them, delighted by everything, leaving warmth in his wake. He worked, she gathered from the conversation, in the Han Group's cultural investment division, art, music, hospitality, and had spent 2 years in New York, which explained the English and the looseness. He sat on her kitchen counter and talked while she ate, and what he gave her, without being obvious about it, was context. The city, the food she'd missed already, with neighborhoods, what was good and what was a tourist trap and where the best light was at what time of day. "You're a photographer," he said. It wasn't a question. "Real one, I mean, not Instagram. Documentary and architectural. Jae-min told me." He said it lightly, but she caught it. "He told you specifically?" "He briefed me." A small smile. "He briefed me on you the same way he briefs me on business situations." Which, he let it trail off, but she heard what he didn't finish, which is unusual. "He wanted me to make sure you had what you needed. I need to be able to work." "I know, we can do something about that." He looked at the window, at the rooftop access door at the end of the hall. "Starting with the roof, have you been up?" She hadn't. The first night Daeho had told her not to. She'd forgotten about it in the chaos of the morning. Min-woo took her up at 3 p.m., when the light was moving toward that particular late afternoon quality that photographers chased. Directional, golden, long-shadowed. The rooftop was wide and unobstructed, concrete and glass railings, with a low seating area someone had furnished with plants and a small table. Seoul stretched in every direction below. Jasmine stood at the edge and felt something unlock in her chest. The cold air hit her face, real cold, the kind that had teeth, and against it the light was almost aggressive in its warmth, the late sun pushing low and hard through the glass towers and turning everything it touched to copper. It smelled like winter up here, like metal and altitude and the faint trace of something being cooked far below. "This is..." "Yeah," Min-woo said, from behind her. "I know." She lifted her camera, and for the first time since the alley, she was just a photographer again. Over the next 4 days, Min-woo became her connection to the outside world in the only way that was available to her. He brought food. He brought conversations. He took her, with a security detail she was told not to worry about and mostly managed to ignore, to a market 2 kilometers away, walking close to her, translating signs and vendors rapid-fire Korean with easy fluency. He took her to a rooftop cafe in Itaewon that had a view she spent 40 minutes photographing. He treated her grief when she mentioned her father in passing once, with the particular grace of someone who knew that loss wasn't a problem to be solved. He just sat with it, let it be what it was. She when asked 1 or 2 careful questions and then talked about something else. "Your brother," she said on the 4th afternoon, sitting on the rooftop as the sun went down. The air had gone properly cold now, the kind that made her wrap both hands around her coffee cup just to have somewhere to put the warmth. Is he always like that? The control thing?" Min-woo was quiet for a moment. "He wasn't always," he said finally. "There was a version of him, a long time ago, that wasn't." He looked at the city. "Our father was a hard man, brilliant in his way. He built the Han Group from a trading company with 12 employees into what it is now. But he believed the empire had to be earned through a particular kind of sacrifice. Softness, sentiment, uncertainty. Those were things he considered debts, and weaknesses the world would eventually collect on." A pause. "Jae-min was 17 when he started learning what that meant, when my father sat him down and told him what it would cost." She looked at him. "What did it cost?" "Everything that wasn't useful." Min-woo said it quietly, not bitterly, just accurately. "He protected me from most of it. That's the part people on the outside don't see. Jae-min took that weight so I wouldn't have to. He closed the door on certain parts of himself so I could leave mine open." She processed that, looked at her camera. "He was 17. Yes." She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. "He's not a bad person," Min-woo said after a moment. "He's a person who made himself into something specific because he had to." Those are different things. She thought about that for a long time after he left. On the 5th day in the apartment, Jasmine discovered something. She'd been going through her photographs from the alley, the 3 shots she'd taken before she turned and walked away. She'd been avoiding them because looking at them felt like looking at the beginning of a problem. But she was running low on shots from the rooftop and the market, and she needed to organize her work folder, and so she opened them. The first 2 were composition shots. Good, actually. The light, the formation, the urban geometry of it, the kind of images that would hold up in any editorial context. She studied them with her professional eye and noted distantly that they were, by any standard, strong work. The third shot was different. In the third shot, the man at the center had turned his head, just slightly, and the angle caught his face in three-quarter profile, enough to see the line of his jaw, the quality of his expression, the particular kind of controlled authority in his posture. The light fell on him in a way that was almost theatrical, like whoever was running the streetlights had decided at that exact second to do something dramatic. She stared at the photograph for a long time. There was something in it that she couldn't categorize with her professional brain. Something that her professional brain was, in fact, trying to stop her from thinking about. It was the same thing she'd noticed in the apartment that first morning. The way he listened, the way he looked at things. She'd photographed a lot of powerful men, usually for corporate commissions, and they had a certain quality in common. They looked at the world like it was a mirror. He didn't do that. Even in this photograph, in this split second she'd caught without his knowledge, he was looking outward, like he was genuinely paying attention to something beyond himself. She put the photograph in a separate folder labeled personal. She told herself it was for professional reasons, that she might want to use it in a personal project about power and presence in urban spaces. She told herself that very convincingly for about 6 minutes. Then she closed the laptop and went to make coffee and thought about what Min-woo had said. A person who made himself into something specific because he had to, and the detail that had stayed with her. 17. When he'd been 17 when his father sat him down and told him what the empire would cost. She thought about what it looked like, a boy of 17 learning to close a door on himself. What it felt like, the moment it shut. That evening, she heard from Tanisha for the first time. A string of messages that ranged from, "Are you alive?" to "Your agency said you extended the assignment?" Explain to, "Okay, something is happening and you need to call me." She sent back a voice note. She didn't explain much because she didn't know how to explain much, but she said, "I'm safe. I'm in a different place than the original apartment. It's complicated. I'll call you soon." She sat with the phone after she sent it and realized with a small surprise that complicated was not how she would describe how she felt. She felt alert, like something she'd been sleepwalking through had suddenly come into focus. Like her camera had adjusted to a new light level. She wasn't sure yet whether that was good. On the 6th day, she went to the rooftop at dusk and found coffee already on the small table. Not from Min-woo. Min-woo's coffee was always in branded cups from the place near the market. This was in a plain ceramic mug, still hot, steam curling in the cold rooftop air. Black the way she drank it. Exactly the temperature she preferred. Hot enough to hold between both hands. Not so hot it burned. She stood there for a moment looking at it. Someone had been up here recently. The concrete around the table was faintly warm near the chair she usually used, sheltered from the wind by the plant arrangement. Whoever had left this had known exactly where she sat. She drank it. She photographed the city as the sky darkened, the last cold light going out in the west while the city's own light rose to replace it. A slow exchange, the sun conceding, the towers claiming the dark. She didn't mention the coffee to anyone. On the 7th day, she woke up to find her photography equipment organized on the desk in the living room, her lenses cleaned and arranged by focal length, her memory card reader plugged in, a new USB hub she hadn't had, still in its packaging, set to the side. She stood in front of the desk for a long time. The morning light from the east window fell across the arranged lenses and made them look deliberate, like a composition someone had thought about. Then she said to the empty apartment, to no one in particular, "You didn't have to do that." The apartment said nothing back. But that evening, Min-woo arrived with food and said, in a very casual, very deliberate way, "Jae-min asked how the equipment situation was. I said I'd pass along that you seem to be managing." A careful pause. He nodded, which is, for context, basically a standing ovation. She turned away before he could see her expression. On the 9th day, Min-woo took her to photograph Bukchon. They went with 2 security personnel who were quiet and good at staying in the background. She'd stopped noticing them much. Min-woo had cleared it with Jae-min, who had apparently stipulated a route and a time window, and 2 additional personnel she couldn't see. She chose not to think too hard about that last part. On the way back, Min-woo took a different route than expected. "Quick detour," he said in the car. "If that's all right." It was a neighborhood she hadn't seen yet. Quieter, residential, older buildings mixed with newer ones. The car stopped in front of a low-walled compound with a sign she couldn't read. "What is this place?" "Jae-min funds it," Min-woo said. "Has for 8 years. Started anonymously, still doesn't talk about it publicly." He looked at his hands. Our father gave a lot of money publicly. Galas, foundations, announcements in the newspapers. He believed charity was a form of positioning." He paused. "Jae-min does this quietly. That was his choice. A private disagreement with how our father moved through the world." She looked at the compound again. "Does your father know?" "He did. He called it a waste of a tax position." Min-woo said it without heat. Jae-min kept doing it anyway. There it was again. The closed door Min-woo had described, and the small things that had survived the closing of it. "He's here most Sundays. Today's Sunday." She looked at him. "Did he ask you to bring me here?" "No." He said it simply, in a way she believed. "I'm just showing you something real." They stayed in the car. She wasn't sure why she didn't suggest they go in. Maybe because it felt too deliberate to engineer. Instead, she raised her camera and framed the compound through the glass. And then she saw him. He was crouched down in the courtyard, which she could see through the compound gate, at the level of a child, not above her. A girl of maybe 5 or 6 was showing him something in her hands, something small, and he was looking at it with complete attention. Not the attention of a man performing kindness. The attention of a man who was genuinely interested in what a 5-year-old had found. He smiled. She pressed the shutter before she thought about it, then immediately felt like she'd stolen something. It was completely different from everything else about his face. Not performed, not controlled. The closed door opened. Just a man in a courtyard in the winter Sunday light, delighted by something a child had found. She looked at the image on her screen for a long time. When they drove away, she said nothing to Min-woo. He said nothing to her, but something had shifted in the car, in the quality of the silence, and they both knew it. That evening, Jae-min came to the apartment for the second time. She heard the elevator and knew it was him before the door opened. There was something about the quality of the silence that preceded him, the way the space seemed to change. She was at the window with her camera, and she turned slowly. He crossed to the kitchen and set down a paper folder. "The situation is developing. I wanted to update you personally, as agreed." His voice was the same, precise, low, no wasted words. "Okay." She lowered the camera. "Tell me." "The base syndicate has identified the photographs as a potential risk. They've escalated their search. Your name is now known to them, which means standard contact points, your agency, your social media, your email, are being monitored. We've secured all of those." "You've secured my email?" "Yes," she breathed. "All right. For how much longer?" "We believe we can contain the core situation within 10 to 14 days. There's a negotiation in progress that, if it concludes as expected, removes the syndicate's incentive. 10 to 14 days, nearly 2 more weeks." She absorbed that. "And if it doesn't conclude as expected, then we manage the next step." She wanted to push on that, but something in the way he said it told her he was already managing 100 things he wasn't telling her, and she would get nothing more on that topic right now. She changed direction. "I saw you today," she said, "at the orphanage." Something changed in his face. So small she almost missed it. A fractional tightening, then something that released. "Min-woo took you." "He didn't take me inside. I stayed in the car. I wasn't trying to intrude." A pause. "The girl with something in her hands. What did she have?" He was quiet for long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "A beetle. A green one. She was convinced it was good luck." "Was she right?" He looked at her. "I have no idea. I told her yes." And there it was. That smile. Not the full version from the courtyard, but a flicker of it. A ghost of the same thing. Here in this apartment, aimed at her. There and gone in under a second. She felt it like a change in air pressure. "And thank you," she said, "for the coffee, the equipment." He picked up his phone from the counter. Min Woo. It wasn't Min Woo. The coffee was in a ceramic mug, and Min Woo doesn't know how I drink mine. He stopped. Didn't turn around. A second. Two. The kitchen completely silent. Then he walked to the door. Don't go to the roof alone after midnight, he said. Is that a rule or a concern? He stopped at the door. Did not turn around. Both. The door closed behind him. She stood in the kitchen and her heart was doing something entirely inconvenient. She picked up her camera. She opened the personal folder. She added the photograph from the courtyard. On the 11th day, she found the journal. It was not dramatic. She was not searching for anything. She was going through the leather carry-on she'd packed in her 2-hour panic back in Chicago, looking for a USB cable she thought she'd packed, and her hand closed around something unfamiliar. A small hardback journal she did not recognize. Dark green cover, her name written on a post-it stuck to the front, in handwriting she knew as well as her own. Jae-min. For when you need to remember what we were looking for. Dad? She sat down on the floor of the bedroom. She opened it. Her father had given this to her. It must have been in her bag, tucked in somewhere she'd missed, before she left. Or someone had put it there. Or she'd packed it herself in those 2 hours without registering it, grief blurred and moving on automatic. She didn't know. She didn't care how. She just read. The first section was ordinary. Notes, observations, the shorthand of a photographer's eye, sketches of light, ideas for projects, his particular way of describing a scene that had always made her feel like she was standing inside it. Then about a third of the way through, the handwriting changed. Not in quality, same loose, leftward-leaning script, but in tone. It became more careful, more deliberate, like he was writing something he'd been sitting with for a long time. Seoul, 1996. I don't know why I've never told Jae-min about this. Maybe because I don't know how. Maybe because the whole thing still doesn't make complete sense to me, even 30 years later. She stopped breathing. I was there for an assignment. A corporate documentary, a new Korean conglomerate expanding internationally. They wanted American eyes on the story. The family's name was Han. She read the name twice. Han Byung-chul, the patriarch, the founder. I spent 3 weeks photographing him, the family, the company. He was a hard man in the way that men who built things from nothing are hard. But there was something there, a recognition I wasn't expecting. He reminded me of my own grandfather in a way I never managed to articulate cleanly. That particular brand of iron that comes from a man who decided, early and permanently, that he would not let the world happen to him. He would happen to the world instead. The cost of that decision was written into everything about him. The way he held his body, the way his sons watched him when they thought he wasn't looking. Especially the older one. She read that sentence 3 times. Han Byung-chul, the patriarch, the founder, had 2 sons. I met the older one briefly. He would have been about 9 or 10 at the time, serious even then. He stood at the edge of things and watched. The kind of boy who understood more than he was supposed to and had already learned to keep that understanding to himself. He had his father's eyes, not the color, but the quality, like he was already calculating the cost of everything he saw. 9 or 10 in 1996. That would make him, she did the math, 36, 37. Her father had met Han Jae-min when Jae-min was 9 years old. She kept reading. Byung-chul and I, there was a conversation the last night I was there. Late. He'd been drinking, which was unusual for him based on everything I'd observed across those 3 weeks. Not drunk. I don't think that man ever allowed himself drunk, but looser than usual. More willing to say what he actually thought instead of what the moment required. He said, "There are debts that don't stay in ledgers, David. The ones that matter live in the family, in the blood, in time." I didn't fully understand it then. I asked him what he meant. He looked at me in that way he had, like he was deciding how much of the real answer to give, and said, "You photograph honestly. That is rarer than you know and harder than it looks. The Han family does not forget honest men." He gave me something before I left, an envelope. He said, "This is not a payment, this is recognition." And recognition creates obligation, on both sides. Inside was a business card and a photograph. A photograph of his sons, the two of them, the older one standing straight and serious, the younger one caught mid-laugh at something off-frame. On the back, in his handwriting, "When the time comes, the O Group honors its debts." I don't know what the debt was. I don't know what the time was supposed to mean. I put the envelope in the safe at home. I've looked at it 20 times in 30 years and I still don't know what to do with it. But I've thought about the older boy, the serious one with his father's accounting eyes. I wonder sometimes what the cost found in him. Jasmine sat on the floor of the bedroom for a very long time. The apartment hummed around her, the refrigerator, the distant city, the particular silence of a high floor. She held the journal in both hands and felt the strange, vertiginous weight of 30 years collapsing into a single point. Her father in a Seoul boardroom in 1996, photographing a man she'd never met. That man's son, 9 years old, standing at the edge of things and watching. That son now in this building. She got up. She took the journal. She picked up her phone and called Minwoo. "I need to see your brother," she said. "Tonight, not tomorrow, tonight." A pause. "Is everything? I'm not in danger. I just need to talk to him. Tell him I found something. He'll want to know." Jae-min arrived in 40 minutes. She had the journal open on the table when he came in. She watched his face as he crossed the room and saw it. Something passed through his eyes, fast and controlled, like a wave he'd smoothed before it could break. "My father gave this to me," she said. "I found it in my bag. He wrote about Seoul in 1996. He wrote about your father." He sat down across from her. He did not reach for the journal. He looked at it for a moment, then at her. "Tell me what it says." She did, all of it. She watched his face carefully while she spoke, and what she saw, for the first time, was a man who was not entirely in control of what his face was doing. Not emotional in any dramatic sense, but moved, something moving under the surface that he was working hard not to let rise. When she finished, there was silence. "You knew," she said, not an accusation, a question. "Not all of it." His voice was careful. "My father mentioned an American photographer, once, near the end of his life. He said he'd met a man in 1996 who photographed honestly, and that honest photography was a form of respect the Han family did not take lightly." A pause. "When your name came to us through the security situation, when your photograph landed on my desk, I recognized the name Brown. Not clearly at first. Just a connection I couldn't immediately place." He stopped. "And then I saw the photograph, and something that had nothing to do with names or families, something else entirely, made me say what I said." She held his gaze. "What did your father mean by the debt? By when the time comes?" Jae-min was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the journal the way a man looks at something he didn't expect to encounter, not afraid of it, but respectful of its weight. "My father had a practice the modern world would consider archaic. When someone acted with genuine integrity toward the Han family, not strategy, not performance, genuinely, he recorded it, not in a ledger, in his own memory, and then in ours." He paused. "Your father photographed him honestly, without flattery, without the softening that most people applied to powerful men out of either fear or ambition. My father said the photographs showed him as he was. He considered that a gift of a very specific kind. A breath. And gifts of that kind, in his system of values, created an obligation that passed down, through time, through the family, until the world created the moment to honor it." She sat back slowly. "And the moment was me, in Gangnam, with a camera." "The moment was you," he said it simply. Though I think my father's accounting was more poetic than he let on. Something moved in his face, not quite the smile, but adjacent to it, warmer than his usual expression. He would have found this satisfying. Was he a man who allowed himself satisfaction? Rarely. A pause. When he did, he kept it private. He looked at the journal again. "Your father wrote about him with more understanding than most people who spent much longer in his company. The part about my grandfather, the iron of a man who decided early that the world would not happen to him." He was quiet. "That is exactly right. And the cost of that decision, he wrote it into both his sons, though we carry it differently." She thought about Minwoo, about the door that had been closed, about a boy of 9 standing at the edge of things and watching. Yet your father? What did he look like? In the photographs my father took. He considered it. I have one in my office. I used to have it at home, but I moved it when I moved the family archive to the corporate building. A pause that felt like a decision. He looked in those photographs like a man who had made peace with something difficult and was not sure he should have. The room was very still. That sounds like a specific kind of grief, she said. Yes. He looked at her. You'd recognize it. She absorbed that, the accuracy of it, the gentleness with which it was delivered. No performance of empathy, just a clean, honest observation. He and my father were more alike than either of them knew, she said. I think, Jae-min said quietly, that my father knew. She held his gaze, steady, and even though her pulse was doing something she would rather not examine directly. Both, she said, his word from the first morning. You brought me here because of your father's obligation, and because of the photograph. Yes. He let that land plainly. He stood, picked up his jacket from the chair, moved toward the door. Don't read the whole journal tonight, he said. Why not? He looked back at her. Because some things are better approached slowly, and you need to sleep. The door closed. She picked up the journal, set it down, picked it up again. She did not sleep for a very long time. If you're still watching, good, because this is where it starts to get complicated in the way that matters. Drop a comment right now. Are you Team Jasmine or Team Jae-min? Are you rooting for this or are you terrified? Because you should probably be both. The 13th day arrived with a tension she could feel in the air before anything happened. Minwoo came early, and he was less easy than usual. The looseness in him slightly tightened, like someone had turned a dial. He brought breakfast, stayed for 20 minutes, answered her questions about the city with his normal warmth. But when she asked him directly if something was happening, he paused for half a second too long before saying, Nothing you need to worry about right now. She had been in this world for nearly 2 weeks. She knew what nothing you need to worry about meant now. It meant the opposite. She went to the rooftop at midday. The sky was white and heavy with the particular Korean winter cloud that sat low and dense. The light flat but strangely beautiful. Everything gray-washed and clean. The cold was different from the clear sky cold of previous days. This was deeper still, the kind that pressed against exposed skin like it had a point to make. It smelled like snow that hadn't fallen yet, like the city holding its breath. She photographed it. She photographed the city at midday with the gray light, which made the glass buildings look like they were made of the same material as the sky, and the effect was something she'd never gotten before and made her think about her father. He who had said once that the best light for photographs of cities was the light that most people forgot to use. She was thinking about that when she heard the rooftop door open. Jae-min crossed the concrete toward her. He was wearing his overcoat against the cold, and she noticed, the photographic eye, always noticing, that he looked different in this flat, honest winter light than he did indoors. The controlled precision of the office and the apartment was still there, but the gray light didn't flatter or dramatize. It just showed things as they were, and what it showed was a man who was tired in the way that people who never admitted to being tired carried it, around the eyes and the set of the jaw. Shouldn't you be in a meeting? She said. Yes. He stopped beside her at the railing, looked at the city. There's a development, and I wanted to tell you directly. Tell me. The base syndicate has made contact. They know you're in our protection. They've proposed an exchange, the photographs in return for a withdrawal of their surveillance. She turned to look at him. The photographs are evidence of something real. You said so yourself. They are. And if you hand them over, they're destroyed. Whatever the negotiation was, the one I accidentally photographed, whatever it was for, it becomes unverifiable. Yes. Is that what you're going to do? No. Something in her chest released. Then what? We have our own leverage now. The negotiation I was conducting that night. It concluded yesterday. The alliance it was meant to secure is in place, which means the base syndicate's demand for the photographs is a defense, not an attack. They're scared. He paused. Yeah, scared men make mistakes. And when they make the mistake, We document it, and the situation resolves. She turned back to the city, the white sky, the silent towers. How long? 2, maybe 3 days. 2 or 3 days. She should feel relieved. She thought about the journal, the debt, both. After it resolves, she said carefully, I go back. He was quiet. To Chicago, she said, because apparently she needed to say it plainly. My life is in Chicago. My work, my friends, my mother. A pause. She's been calling every day. She's worried. I know, he said it quietly. I've had someone check on her, discreetly. She stared at him. You've been... She stopped, breathed. The presumption of it should have made her angry. Somehow, standing in the cold on the roof of his building, so knowing he'd quietly made sure her mother was safe, it didn't make her angry at all. And that frightened her more than the Bay Syndicate. You can't do things like that, she said. Her voice was less steady than she wanted it to be. Your mother's safety is a reasonable consideration. I know it is. That's not... She turned to face him. He was already facing her. They were close. The rooftop compressed distances differently than indoors. The cold air moved between them, and she was suddenly very aware of the warmth that was coming off him anyway. Close as they were standing. Jae-min. She'd used his name. No title, no formality. The first time, something happened in his eyes. I need you to not make it harder for me to leave, she said. The city hummed below them. The gray light made everything honest. And he looked at her with that quality of attention she'd first photographed in an alley 12 days ago and had been trying not to think about every day since. I know, he said. His hand moved, just slightly, lifted toward her face, and then stopped. Withdrew. Like a man who had started something and chosen, carefully not to finish it yet. 2 words, I know. They stood like that for a moment that had no clean edges. The cold and the white sky and the city below, and the steam of their breath almost touching in the winter air. Then her camera, still around her neck, knocked lightly against the railing, and the sound broke something, and she stepped back, and he looked at the city. 2 days, he said, back to facts, back to the clean edges. 2 days, she repeated. He went back inside. She stood at the railing for a long time after. The cold came back properly once he was gone. She hadn't noticed how much of it she'd stopped feeling while they were standing close. She noticed now. She pulled her jacket tighter. The camera was in her hands before she realized she'd lifted it. She lowered it again without taking a shot. Some things you didn't photograph, some things you just let be. 2 days became 3 because the Bay Syndicate's mistake, when it came at the wrong hour and in the wrong location, and required an additional 12 hours to process and document. Jae-min called her himself to explain this, which he didn't have to do. She'd been expecting a message through Minwoo. Instead, her phone rang at 10 p.m. on what was supposed to be her last night. It'll be tomorrow, he said. I'm sorry. Is everyone safe? A pause. Yes. Then don't apologize. It's not your fault. She was sitting on the rooftop. She hadn't told him that. She'd answered the phone when it rang and walked upstairs without thinking. The night air was biting, colder than the daytime gray had promised. She'd brought a blanket and the thermos, and she was watching Seoul at night, which she'd come to understand was a different city entirely from its daytime self. More honest somehow, in its own light. Where are you? Still at the office. A breath. Where are you? Rooftop. Another pause, different in quality. It's cold. I know, I'm dressed. She looked at the city, at this view that she'd spent 16 days watching change, learning its rhythms and its light. The way it looked at 7 a.m. and at noon and at 10 p.m. and at 2 a.m. on the nights she couldn't sleep. She was going to miss this view in a way that felt disproportionate to the amount of time she'd had it. Jae-min, can I ask you something? Yes. When you saw the photograph, the one on your desk, the security feed from the alley, she kept her voice level. What did you see? Silence, the kind she'd learned to read. Not evasive, just careful. A man choosing the right words rather than the easy ones. Someone who looked at things the way I wish I still could, he said finally. She closed her eyes. The cold air moved across her face like a slow hand. What does that mean? It means I spent a long time training myself not to look at things like that, strategically, efficiently. The way you photograph something, the way I saw you, even in a security feed image, that's the opposite of how I move through the world now. You were photographing streetlights and puddles, the angle of a neon sign, things that had no use, no function, just the fact of how they looked. A pause. It was like seeing something I forgot I'd lost. She opened her eyes. Seoul glittered below her, indifferent and magnificent. The light it put into the sky, meeting the dark coming down from above. Summer, do you wish you hadn't lost it? Every day, he said, simply, without drama. She sat with that, the phone warm against her ear, the thermos cooling slowly beside her. The distance between this rooftop and wherever he was sitting, 4-5 kilometers, somehow not feeling like distance at all. Come see the city from up here, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. Before I leave, just come sit up here, not to talk about the situation or the syndicate or my photographs. Just as a person, a very long silence. I have reports. You have tonight. The reports will be there at 6 a.m. They always are. Another silence. She waited. Give me 40 minutes, he said. He arrived in 35. She had, in the 40 minutes she thought she'd have, found a second blanket in the apartment closet and brought it to the roof. She'd refilled the thermos with fresh coffee from the kitchen. The smell of it rising in the cold air like something deliberately warm, something that had decided to push back against the night. When the door opened and he stepped through, he paused, looking at the blanket on the second chair, the thermos, the arrangement of it. And something in his face did the thing she'd learned to watch for, the small, private shift. He sat down. He took the coffee when she offered it, both hands around the cup, which she noticed because it was such a human gesture, so different from the boardroom precision. He looked at the city. She photographed it. Him, the city and him in the same frame, the towers behind him soft in the ambient glow, his face catching the upwash of Seoul's own light. He noticed. He didn't look away. Didn't pose or shift or construct himself the way people always did when they knew they were being photographed. He just looked at her through the lens, and in his unguarded face, she saw everything she'd been slowly understanding for 16 days. The cost of the control, the thing that lived underneath it, the version of him that only appeared in courtyards with children and on rooftops at midnight when nobody was supposed to be watching. She pressed the shutter. One shot. He looked at her, after. What did you see? She lowered the camera, looked at the image on the small screen. The city behind him, his face in the upward light, the coffee cup held in both hands like an anchor. Looked at him. Someone who forgot he was allowed to want things, she said. Something moved across his face. She watched it. Let it be what it was. And he reached out. His hand covered hers where it rested on the arm of the chair. Not a grip, not a hold, just a placement. Warm against the cold and so deliberate that it couldn't be anything except a choice. A door opening, just slightly. Then he picked up his coffee, looked at the city. She looked at the city too. The cold pressed in from all sides, and the warmth of the coffee and the blankets and the proximity of another person pushed back. And somewhere below them, Seoul kept moving, indifferent and enormous and beautiful. They sat like that until the sky started changing color in the east. At 6:15 a.m., Park Dae-ho called. Jae-min stepped away to answer. She watched him from the roof, the shift back into the other version, the CEO, the man who ran the Han Group and managed the Bay Syndicate, and didn't sleep enough and carried his father's closed door everywhere he went. The shift was fast and practiced, but she'd seen the other side of it now, and you couldn't unsee something like that. He came back. It's done. The situation? Yes. His voice was back to what it usually was, measured, controlled. But his eyes, when they found hers, were still the rooftop version. The syndicate has stood down. The photographs are no longer an active risk. You're free to leave whenever you'd like. She nodded, looked at the city in the early light, the east light, coming in clean and cold and golden, the best light. The light her father had always preferred. It turned the glass towers into something warm for the first time all morning. The city looked for a few minutes like something that had been waiting to be seen clearly. She was going to miss this. "I need to go back," she said. "I know. My mother. My life. I can't." Jae-min. He said her name the way she'd said his. Plain, undecorated. "I know." She looked at him. He was looking at the city. The light was on his face, and she thought about her father's journal. The older one standing straight and serious. And the boy of 9 who had become this, and what it had cost. And the beetle the girl had cupped in her hands. And I told her yes. 3 months from now, he said, still looking at the city, there is a photography exhibition opening in Seoul. Urban documentary. The Han Group is a primary sponsor. A pause. The curator has been looking for someone with an American perspective who understands the city. Someone who has spent time here, photographed it at different hours in different light. The position is paid. It would require a 2-week residency. A breath. I may know the curator personally. She looked at him. He looked at her. I may know someone, she said. The ghost of the smile. The courtyard version. The one she'd stolen through the car window on a Sunday. The one that lived in her personal folder and refused to stay professional. I thought you might. She left that afternoon. The car to the airport was a different car from the one that had brought her to the building 16 days ago, but Park Dae-ho drove it himself, which she understood somehow was significant. Min-woo came to see her off in the lobby. He hugged her, easy and warm the way he did everything, and said, "Come back. Seoul suits you." And she believed him. She didn't see Jae-min in person before she left. She was in the car, pulling away from the building, when her phone lit up. Unknown number. She answered. "Safe travels, Miss Brown." "It's Jae-min." A pause, then quietly, "Jae-min." She looked out the window at the city passing, the markets and the towers and the river, and the morning light doing what it always did, making everything look, briefly, like it was being seen for the first time. She thought about her father and his 1996 Seoul, the boardroom and the patriarch and the serious boy at the edge of things. She thought about how much her father would have loved the city in the morning. "Jae-min," she said. "Yes. 3 months." A breath on the line. Small, controlled, but there. 3 months. The city moved past her window. The Han River caught the light. Without thinking about it, she raised her camera with one hand, still holding the phone with the other, and photographed Seoul through the glass. The river, the bridge, the towers going soft in the distance. She was already thinking about the angle she'd want when she came back. The light she'd be working with in 3 months, which would be different. Later in the year, longer days, different shadows. She was already planning for it. The line stayed open. Neither of them said anything else. When the car reached the highway and the city gave way to the wide flat approach to Incheon, she finally said, "Goodbye." "Until then," he said. The line closed. She went through her photographs on the flight home. The Bukchon rooftop, the market in the afternoon, a vendor's hands wrapped around something warm, Han River at dawn, the water silver and flat, the gray light city at noon, the towers dissolving into the sky, the orphanage courtyard, a small girl with something in her hands, a man crouched to her level, the winter Sunday light falling across them both like it had decided they were worth the trouble. The last shot, a rooftop at midnight. Seoul behind him, enormous and glittering. A man looking at a city, and in the last fraction of a second before the shutter closed, looking at her, with the coffee cup in both hands, the cold air, the one lamp above the seating area casting a small circle of warm light in all that dark. His face open, in a way she didn't think he knew how to stop. She put her hand on the screen, on his face. Her father had said, "The lens creates distance between you and the thing that's hurting you. Just enough distance to breathe." He'd also said, in the same conversation, something she'd forgotten until now. "But sometimes, Jae-min, the lens shows you something you're supposed to move toward, and then you put the camera down." She thought about him in 1996, about Han Byung-chul in a Seoul boardroom, drinking late and saying honest things to an American photographer he'd just met. About the photograph her father had been given. 2 boys, one serious, one laughing. The back of it inscribed in a dead man's handwriting. When the time comes, the O Group honors its debts. She thought about what it meant to be the time coming. She thought about a boy of 9, standing at the edge of things, already learning to calculate the cost of everything he saw. About the door that had been closed at 17 and the things that had survived the closing. The orphanage, the beetle, the rooftop, the coffee and a ceramic mug. She thought about both. She thought about what she'd said on the rooftop. Someone who forgot he was allowed to want things. And the way he'd looked at her after. The way his hand had felt, covering hers. Warm and deliberate and barely there. Like he was testing whether a door could open without coming off its hinges. She wasn't sure what 3 months would bring. She wasn't sure what version of herself would step off a plane back into Seoul, or what version of him would be somewhere in that city, still carrying his father's accounting and his father's iron and the rare private smile he kept for children and rooftops and women who photograph things honestly. But she was sure of one thing. She was already counting. You made it to the end. And if this story hit you the way we think it did, you know what to do. Subscribe right now if you haven't already. We are just getting started. Like this video, because every single one counts. And drop a comment below. What moment got you? The coffee in the ceramic mug? The rooftop? The hand? Tell us, because we read everyone, and we want to know. We'll see you in the next story. Don't miss it.